The reason why any other motive other than, say, truth is bad for scholarship is because reasoning is very, very heavily motivated. So this is the major psychological point I want to make to you today. Human reasoning is motivated. We're not very good at objective, careful, balanced reasoning. When we evaluate a proposition, anything, that fat is good for you, that Obama was born in Hawaii or Indonesia, wherever, any proposition, you evaluate it, we don't say, well, what's the evidence on one side? What's the evidence on the other? Which one wins? We don't do that. Our brains are not set up to do that. We start with a feeling. We want to believe X or we want to doubt X. We ask, can I believe it? I want to believe this. Can I believe it? And then we send our reasoning off on a search to find evidence. If we find one piece of evidence, we can stop because we're now, if someone holds us accountable, they say, well, why do you think that? You pull out the piece of evidence. You say, here, this is why. So this is what the research shows. We have motivated reasoning. I'll show it to you in action. So in one study, subjects come into the lab. They're in a psychology course. They're learning about experimental methods. And they're given a study. It looks like it's from the journal Science. And it shows that caffeine consumption is associated with breast cancer. And your job is to evaluate the study and just critique it. Does it look like a well-done study? So who do you think finds a lot of flaws in that study? Coffee drinkers. Yeah, coffee drinkers hate it, right? All coffee drinkers? Female coffee drinkers are asking, must I believe? I don't want to believe this. Must I believe it? And so they look really critically and they can pick it apart. The sample size is too small. They didn't control for this or that or age or whatever. They really don't want to believe it and they don't have to. They don't have to. Let me show you another study. Subjects come into the lab. They sit in front of a computer and they're told lots of stuff's going to flash up on the screen. If you press this button within half a second of seeing a letter, then you get a nickel added to your account. And so lots of stuff flashes up. You press the button. Okay, what was that? What did I put up? Anyone see it? Okay, so if you were paid to spot letters, you saw that as a B. But half the people were told you get a nickel every time there's a number, and they see it as a 13. So note that nobody is crazy. There is ambiguity. Nobody sees it as an L or a fish or something. It's either a B or a 13. And as long as there's ambiguity, we see what we want to see. Can I believe that's a letter? Yes. Click. So this is the way our minds work. We see what we want to see. Now, this has enormous implications for scholarship because in scholarship, sometimes maybe we really don't know and really have no opinion, but usually we have an idea. We want to believe it, if only because it's our idea, or maybe we want to believe it because it supports our politics, whatever. We're not indifferent to anything. We are indifferent to very few things in the world. So if you start by wanting to believe one side of something, you're going to find evidence for it, and you're generally going to conclude that it's true. So scholarship to support a political agenda almost always succeeds in supporting it. The scholar, as she goes along, rarely, if ever, believes that she was biased. This is just the fact. This is what my research has uncovered. A motivated scholarship often propagates pleasing falsehoods. Once something is published that is politically pleasing to the majority of scholars, it's almost impossible to recall it because it'll get cited. You can sort of issue a retraction within your field, but it's going to spread fields and it'll live for decades as a falsehood. There's only one major protection against motivated scholarship, and that is institutionalized disconfirmation. That means if you participate in an institution that institutionalizes critique and disconfirmation, then the bad ideas, the bad research gets caught and filtered out. And that's the way the academy is supposed to work. This is the genius of science. It's not that each scientist is so rational. It's that science is a community of scholars that critique each other's work. That's great. And it used to work, but it stopped working in the 90s. Here's the data. So this is a representative sample data of American professors all over the country. And as late as the mid-1990s, this is people on the left or far left. This is right or far right. These are moderates. As late as the 1990s, the left-right ratio in the academy was only 2-1. Just 2-1, left to right. But after about 15 years, this is the transformative period, mid-90s to about 2010. We have a radical change in the American professoriate. As the greatest generation and silent generation, they retire, replaced by baby boomers and Gen X. Almost everybody is on the left, because even this 5-1, this is everybody. This includes the professors in the dental school and the engineering school and the agriculture school. If you focus just on the humanities and social sciences, it's Well, it varies. A new study just came out between 17 to 1 and 60 to 1. It depends on the department. So here's my department. Here's psychology. I published a paper on this problem with some of my colleagues. We found every bit of data we could on the politics of American psychology professors. So in 1960, it was 4 to 1 voting Kennedy over Nixon. And then they were asked to recall who did they vote for previously. So about 2 to 1. So in 1960, professors were mostly Democrats, not surprising. As late as 1996, it was the same, about 4 to 1. But look at what happens by every measure afterwards. Whether you look at where you are left, right, or who you voted for, it shoots up. And the data that just came out last week, a new paper by Mitchell Langbert, is 17 to 1 for this year. So it's skyrocketing up. Very few people understand this. Very few people in this country know just how radically the professoriate has changed in the last 20 years. And what this means is that you undergrads here, you are exposed to less political diversity than ever before in the history of this country, except maybe for the 18th century when they were divinity schools. But since they became research universities, there has never been as homogeneous, as politically homogeneous a professoriate as we have this year. And it's all very, very recent. This is not a slow change. It's a very rapid change with profound consequences for everything that happens at the university. Now, what are those consequences? For students, I think those consequences are that orthodox views, whatever is politically pleasing to the left, become much more strongly held now than they were 10 or 20 years ago, but much less weakly supported. People don't know the reasons for their beliefs because they've never been challenged. Nobody dares challenge them. And this was Mill's concern, that if you're not even exposed to anybody who believes the opposite, you can't know what you think you know. Secondly, students walk on eggshells in class discussions. Now, this isn't only the problem of the shifting balance. This is also social media. But what I'm finding as I speak around the country, students are complaining in private that in their seminar classes, someone says something and nobody dares to disagree. There's just not the kind of give and take and argument. People are afraid. They're afraid they'll be crucified on social media. They're afraid, they say mostly of each other, not so much the professors as each other. But the point is students are walking on eggshells, and that means in your classes, I hope it's better here at Duke, but what I'm seeing around the country is in classes, students are much more afraid to speak up and disagree than they were 10 or 20 years ago. They're walking on eggshells. Many become intellectually fragile. I'll talk about fragility in a few minutes. Because if you've never had to defend your ideas and then suddenly you're challenged, then it feels like a phrase that some use is, you have invalidated my existence. Students now say that. If you challenge a core conviction, they say you have invalidated my existence. And that's a form of violence. And so we can't allow that. We can't allow a speaker on campus who might do that. The consequences for faculty are almost as profound. Certainly there's a misallocation of effort as many people flood into the trendy topics. I read recently there's a huge decline in teaching military history and even political history. Everybody's focused on the trendy topics. So misallocation of effort, loss of rigor, fear of dissent, and fear of students. The professors are increasingly afraid of students. Everybody's on the left, but they're increasingly being hauled up for some charge of racism or sexism, and they don't know why, but professors all over the country are pulling videos, pulling material. They're not presenting things that might be provocative, because what if a student feels somehow victimized by hearing that? They take you in front of the Equal Opportunity Commission. It takes weeks or months. It's horrible. So you, again, nationally, undergrads are being exposed to far less provocative material in 2016 than they were even in 2014. Just the last 2 years, professors all over the country are changing their teaching because they're afraid of the students.